Alright, so I have quite an interesting math problem here that I can't seem to figure out. We're playing a video game here, and in this video game, objectives are going to be randomly selected. The way that they're going to be randomly selected is that first the computer is going to randomly decide whether it wants to choose an eastern, western, or central lane for these objectives to go down. There's an equal chance of each of these being selected. Once it does select one of these lanes, it's going to pick the first objective. Now the first objective can either be R or D, but there's a catch. If the western lane is selected, then the only possible option is R. If any other lane is selected, then R and D are both options. However, once again, if West is selected, R is the only possible option. Now, once the first one has been selected, which is a 50-50 chance, unless of course it's W, the second objective is going to be selected. And this is going to be completely determined by the lane. There are going to be east options over here. There are going to be central options over here. And there are going to be west options over here. Now in the event that it was an eastern lane, say there's three potential options here. In the event that it was a western lane, there are four potential options. And in the event that it was a central lane, there are two potential options. One of these options is overlapped. It's a possibility in both a central and a western lane. Now, of course, if we were in a situation where D was popping up as the first objective and then it immediately went to one of these potential options on the east, we already know that we are in an east lane. The entire goal of this math problem is to determine our probability of being inside one of each of these lanes, since that is not made apparent to the user. However, if we get into an interesting situation where, say, D was selected and then it goes to this objective that could potentially be in a central or a western lane, well, because we know that a western lane would have to pick R in order to start, we can determine that we are still in a central lane here, because that's the only way you can go from D to this potential objective here. However, the tricky part and the question I have is, if R is selected, and then it goes to this ambiguous objective, which can either be in a central or a west lane, what is the likelihood, what is the percentage odds of this being a west lane versus this being a central lane? Of course, the two determining factors being that because it was R selected right off the bat, we know we are more likely to be in a western lane, simply because if you do the math, then you determine, that R is only an available option in west, and then, I'm sure you guys can figure that out. And then the second, of course, the second option being, or the second factor being that if we were going into west, then there's a 1 in 2 chance that this objective pops up. And if we were going into a central lane, there's only a 1 in 4 chance that this objective pops up, since once again, there's an equal odd for any of these to be selected within their respective lane. So, considering the fact that we don't know any of this as the user, if R pops up as the objective, and then the second objective becomes this ambiguous objective in both a central and a western lane, what is the percent chance of us being in west versus central? Thank you for your help.